It turns out that we have found an ancient piece of paper, a papyrus from Egypt in the Coptic language that says that Jesus might have had a wife. In fact, let me quote from the papyrus. Jesus said to them, "My wife." Well, there you go. There it is. And then it goes on to irrelevant things. Well, that seems fairly clear, actually. If it's true, of course, people are doubting its authenticity. We'll get to that in a second. And it's not just about his wife. It also talks about how he had female disciples. And for example, in one part of the papyrus, he says, "She will be able to be my disciple." She. Now, of course, the Catholic Church is very against this because they said that Jesus did not have a wife, of course, that he was celibate. Come on. On the other hand, he was born to someone who was celibate. He had a virgin birth, of course. And that, of course, that you could not have females leaders in the church, and this would seem to contradict that. In fact, the Vatican newspaper declared it a fake. Oh. Of course they did, otherwise all the popes were wrong.
It's like they didn't even read the Da Vinci Code.
Yeah, come on. They're like, and by the way, and then Jesus also admitted to not being the Son of God, but just being an average Jew. Right. The Vatican's like, oh, that was totally true. Oh, damn it, we shouldn't have admitted that. Yeah, of course they're going to say it's fake. So I love this part. Other scholars who doubted its authenticity based on its poor grammar, blurred text, and uncertain origin.
Yeah, well, what do you think the other things that you base your whole biblical history on? That was what? It was on a printer?
Yeah, I was like, wait, are you describing the Bible?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we found that was a dot matrix printer, but it was a printer.
Now, blurred text?
Blurred text?
Yeah, if it's a couple of thousand years old, I hope that it's blurred. Otherwise, then you'd have real issues.
And what we know is that from the scientific study, which you mentioned, is that it is ancient. Like, nobody made this last week to look ancient. It's ancient.
And in fact, so let's get to that. The Boston Globe explains, but a new scientific analysis of the papyrus and the ink, as well as the handwriting and grammar, showed the document is ancient. It comes from the same time as basically the other Gospels, okay? And the Harvard Divinity School says there's no evidence of modern fabrication that was found.
No forgery. It's not a forgery. And as we also know that the Gospels, like there were other Gospels. They literally rejected them.
No, that's such a great point. So a lot of people think that the people who wrote the Bible knew Jesus, right? Yeah. But they didn't. And that's not us being agnostic, etc. No, the Vatican says, everybody says this. That's a fact, right? You can go ask, right? A lot of people are like, no. Yeah, no, they're not the people, they're not the disciples of Jesus who wrote the Bible. They're people who wrote those things sometimes 80 years. The earliest one is like 80 years after Jesus' death. Sometimes several hundred years after Jesus' death. That's the stuff that's in your current Bible. So now this is another one that apparently talked about this guy named Jesus, right?
And there were many that were rejected at the
Council of Nicaea.
The Council of Nicaea, when they picked the books that made the Bible.
So that, and again, a lot of people don't know that, but you just study biblical history. You don't. Harvard Divinity School obviously teaches that, right? But so does the Vatican. Vatican knows it. They don't deny it. So what they did at the Council of Nicaea was a political gathering, and they said, "Oh, we like this one. This makes sense. We'll put that over here.
Right.
This one, not so much. No,
don't like that.
Right? Yeah, exactly." And they made some decisions as to what Jesus was and wasn't, hundreds of years after his so-called existence.
And at a time when everybody died at 50, 40.
At most.
So we're talking like generations and generations past of stories that were told, and then finally someone wrote down. There's really, just logic. Believe it or not, logic has to tell you that the stories are flawed.
Yeah, and so there was at the time dozens of people who claimed to be a prophet. Right? Mm-hmm. And so they have this one guy that they think said X, Y, and Z. But if you think about the Bible, actually, how much of I just called him so-called Jesus can you confirm? Let's say there's a guy named Jesus. He's from Bethlehem or, and beyond that, it's all speculation hundreds of years later as to what he said and what he did. Now, this papyrus happens to say, okay, he had a wife and he had female disciples. That was rejected at some point in the history of things, or it could have made it into the Bible, and the Bible would tell you different things. Because several hundred years after he died, in a time where they had, very poor records, they don't know.
Right.
They're just guessing, right? So the fact that this is not a forgery,
They're
that's a big revelation.
They weren't guessing. They were constructing a story that suited them best. There's no more reason to believe that story than this story. I don't know whether he was married, I don't know, but I know he was a guy.
Yeah, and there's dozens of those prophets, so it's possible that this guy was like, was that Jesus who was married, or was it Bob? Right? I don't know, one of those guys claiming to be the Son of God was married, but I don't remember which one was which. Right? And by the way, how awesome would it be if Jesus was married?
Yeah, right.
Oh, because his wife, like, oh yeah, Son of God, spare me, take out the frickin' garbage, okay?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, I'll believe you're the Son of God when that lawn gets mowed, okay? There's no way his wife didn't question him, okay? It's inconceivable. That's more inconceivable than the Bible being literally true.
Yeah.
So I love the idea of Jesus being like, oh God, here we go again. Okay.
His wife would be like, oh, she's your disciple, is she?
She's going to be your disciple.
Oh, so you guys were just studying. I got it. That's fine. Sure.